My name is David Babson. I'm a program director with ARPA-E, and I'm going to talk to you about new ideas that we want to elicit in the space of carbon farming, advanced technologies that would enable low-cost ag sector carbon management and ecosystem services to kind of extend and augment some of the thinking and programs that we have in place at ARPA-E. So the thing that interests me, the thing that drives the development of the programs that I'm interested in is climate change mitigation. This plot shows the net GHG emissions path that we need to follow to keep global temperatures below 2 degrees of warming. On the x-axis is time, and on the y-axis is net emissions in gigatons per year. The red line is that path. What we can see is that somewhat after 2080, we actually need to reduce all of our net emissions going into the atmosphere and actually make them negative. And the blue area under the zero line are the net negative emissions. And you can see that the contribution of net negative emissions to the overall net emissions are quite substantial, even well before the crossover point. This is to say that we need to continue developing technologies like renewable wind and solar and other types of technologies to reduce emissions, but also to begin building the capacity to remove and service a negative emissions industry as well. And the amount of negative emissions is quite substantial, reaching 20 gigatons per year by 2100. And I want to give you a sense of just how much 20 gigatons per year is. In order to get to 20 gigatons by comparison, you would need to add up a number of different sectors. The first being U.S. trucking, so all of the packages that are transported on trucks or on-road vehicles, from Amazon packages and mail and those sorts of things. That cumulative mass would be about 9.8 gigatons per year. To get to 20, we would have to add on top of that all of the material flows through U.S. pipelines. That would give us another 3 gigatons per year. And then to actually get to 20, we would have to add on top of that both global cement production and global iron ore production. This is to say that this future negative emissions industry is going to be enormous. And from the Department of Energy standpoint, from ARPA-E standpoint, we recognize that there will be this very large new industry, and we need to make sure that the technologies that service it are both low cost and energy efficient. And there's a number of different strategies to achieve negative emissions. These include biological solutions, whereby you would leverage the natural carbon cycling of environmental systems to remove carbon, and you could implement technologies to augment that carbon removal and to increase the storage of carbon in natural systems. There are engineered solutions that could include things like direct air capture or enhanced weathering, whereby you would engineer systems to directly mitigate atmospheric or environmental CO2 from oceans or from the atmosphere. And finally, there are hybrid solutions. And in hybrid solutions, you would leverage the natural biological cycling in ag systems or in forest systems, but you would connect that accumulated biomass, that carbon that had been drawn down, to downstream environmental systems or uses, whereby that carbon would be contained in engineered systems or in geologic systems that would prevent it from getting back into the atmosphere. This could include things like bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, construction and buildings with biomass or biochar. The fact of the matter is, given the scale of the negative emissions industry, there is really no silver bullet that will allow us to achieve the level of emissions reductions that we need to hit without pursuing a varied approach and deploying a number of different strategies simultaneously by developing technologies in all of these different spaces and then deploying them into environments and systems and economies where they're the most efficient. We can achieve the negative emissions that we need to achieve with the greatest efficiency. Ultimately, in the future, there's really going to be, two critical drivers for innovation in the areas that I'm interested in pursuing. One is greenhouse gas emissions reductions, which I kind of have explained so far, but also land sparing technologies. And these kind of go hand in hand because our ability to spare land will actually improve our ability to better manage carbon and provide ecosystem services. Similar to GHG emissions and to carbon, whereby we need to reduce our emissions into the atmosphere and actually go negative, the same is true for the land and ag sector. We actually need to innovate to create the ability to reduce our use of land for ag purposes. So, as we're converting more and more natural land to ag, we actually need to slow that rate of conversion down to zero and actually get to a point where we can take active ag land and convert it back to natural lands to allow for greater carbon management and ecosystem services. And so really we need to do more and make more with less. And this concept of achieving a new carbon economy, one that is prosperous and growing, but that captures and removes more carbon than it emits, will require us to engineer new types of systems that integrate both our bio-based circular economy with an industrial and energy-based circular economy to achieve a new carbon economy that is congruent with addressing climate change. And we also have to keep in mind that we live in a carbon-based economy, from our iPhone cases and fuels and chemicals and carpets and all types of materials. It is really the backbone of our modern economy. And a future economy won't so much be a low carbon economy as much as it will be a new carbon economy. And so while we are reducing the flux of carbon from our industrial system into the atmosphere, we also need to be thinking about strategies in which we can manage carbon in the economy. And the cool thing about the bioeconomy, which is one of the concepts that will allow us to produce carbon-based products in a sustainable way, is that it allows us to simultaneously achieve two things that we need. We need tools for managing carbon, we need the ability to go carbon negative, and we need the ability to produce carbon-based products. And so thinking about the bioeconomy supply chain will allow us to kind of achieve all of these things at the same time. And so this concept is, you produce renewable feedstock from biomass, or you utilize CO2 directly from environmental systems. You apply a conversion technology and you're able to synthesize fuels, chemicals, products, and materials in a, theoretically net neutral or perhaps even carbon negative manner. And the importance of carbon management from the bioeconomy standpoint is growing. So there's greater and greater and growing demand for renewable products and products with a lower carbon intensity, not just fuels and chemicals and materials as are made up by a lot of the commitments from corporations to develop and purchase these products, but also a growing interest from some to purchase direct negative emissions or carbon removal attributes. And so in the future, the ability to not just reduce the carbon intensity associated with an individual product, but actually build out negative emissions pathways for those products will actually have more value or create more value for the bioeconomy. And this is something that is really important for us achieving challenges, but creates a lot of technical barriers to knock down. And so ARPA-E is seeking to transform the bioeconomy value chain by targeting barriers along the entire supply chain of the bioeconomy. And so I'm going to talk about, in this presentation, the upstream attributes and programs that we have in place and the interests that we have in new technologies that we want to elicit. We want people to be thinking about, the upstream components, the carbon management components of the bioeconomy to improve overall sustainability and carbon management capabilities for the overall economy. And so first I'm going to talk about, in this presentation, our Terra and Roots and Smart Farm programs. I'm going to outline what we're investing in this space to clearly delineate, what we're already investing in, such that we can hopefully elicit new ideas that are made possible through these programs, or that augment them and supplement them in ways that benefit the overall economy. So first, let me talk about the Terra and Roots program. The Terra and Roots program were started before I came to ARPA-E, but the idea here was to create the ability to generate large amounts of data inexpensively to get better information about crops, so that you could engineer and breed more robust crops that are more efficient more quickly. So the Terra program sought to, identify above ground attributes of crops, their phenotypic outputs, and connect those phenotypic characteristics to genotypic characteristics, so that you could engineer crops that accumulate biomass more rapidly or more carbon efficiently. And the Roots program sought to identify below ground phenotypic attributes, so that you could connect those to genotypic attributes, and you can engineer crops with root systems that were, say, deeper or more recalcitrant or more capable of removing and sequestering carbon underground. Ultimately, these programs were data plays that would allow us to really, change how we could engineer crops. And there was a lot of innovation in gene and trait associations, high resolution phenotyping, crop prediction algorithms connected with AI systems, machine learning, and then also high throughput field data acquisition. Now, with these programs in place, moving beyond where we went with the Terra and Roots programs, another thing to think about, a thing that would actually enable a future carbon farming industry, an industry where the ag sector could provide for carbon management and service that negative emissions industry, we could think about what are the actual synthetic biology attributes that we could engineer into crops to make them better and more capable of performing these functions. And as I mentioned earlier, there are, biological solutions for carbon management. There's ecosystem level biological solutions for carbon management. And this can be in the space of forest and land management, soil carbon sequestration, soil amendments and nutrient management, or coastal blue carbon and aquatic systems. Specifically, applications of synthetic biology could be used to increase carbon fixation rates in trees for the forest sector, or increase root biomass and recalcitrance in ag systems, or introduce microbial consortium that enhance carbon mineralization in soils to actually allow carbon to be sequestered in greater amounts in our managed land systems, or engineering and introducing macroalgae with increased biomass yields for a growing ocean farming industry that spares land. So these are all different types of applications from synthetic biology that could be applied in this biological carbon removal space that we would be very interested in hearing if there are innovative transformational ideas that would promote that. So let me move also to the Smart Farm program. This is the first program that I worked on developing when I came to ARPA-E. And what motivates this program is we saw an opportunity where we realized that the value of biofuels is a function of its carbon intensity, because there are established carbon markets for biofuels. Specifically, the low carbon fuel standard in California that gives almost $200 per ton of carbon value to biofuels. And the value of the biofuel is really a function of the difference of the carbon intensity of the biofuel to an established petroleum baseline. So if you're able to increase the difference in between the established baseline and your biofuel, you increase the value of your biofuel. And from this plot, you can see that the the addition of all of the pieces that add up to producing the biofuel contribute to the life cycle emissions, and the farm emissions are quite substantial, but are not an area that we can easily reduce. And one of the reasons is we can't easily quantify the specific farm level benefits of particular decisions that farmers make. But there is a lot of opportunity to reduce the carbon intensity of producing feedstock crops. This could include nitrogen management strategies, reducing chemical applications or energy use on farms. And we could even make the production of grains that go into biofuel supply chains carbon negative through new strategies and new technologies that would allow more carbon to be stored underground. Ultimately, what we found is that in order for farmers to be able to make the decisions to adopt those new technologies and implement those practices that would increase the overall sustainability and even drive them towards carbon negative crop production, you would need a way to incentivize that behavior by connecting those farm practices to carbon markets. And that is something that is lacking. And in order for the efficiency of carbon markets to extend all the way to farmers, we need to be able to get very robust data on the quote unquote carbon harvest with very high resolution and very low cost. And so Smart Farm seeks to develop those technologies. And we are developing, investing in a number of different technologies to get there. And the importance here is to say we're focused mostly or only on the technologies to quantify that harvest. But there's a lot of technologies that could actually, reduce these emissions and allow farmers to profit from the observed emissions reductions that the technologies from Smart Farm allow us to observe. So to this end, we're very interested in understanding how we might develop or use new technologies to avoid some of the highest emitting aspects of the ag system. So for example, fertilizer has a very large GHG and environmental impact. Specifically, the fertilizers that are used today are produced from Haber-Bosch. It can have a substantial, cost impact and energy impact. 3% of global energy is used in Haber-Bosch, and 37% of energy inputs to corn is due to fertilizer. Now, are there new ways that we could avoid Haber-Bosch? Perhaps, and we would love to see transformational ideas that could avoid both the energy and environmental impacts of Haber-Bosch. So we're seeking to identify biotechnological solutions to displace Haber-Bosch, decreasing the emissions and environmental impacts. And some of these, potential solutions, could, require fewer applications, would avoid runoff, and require less or no energy input to fix nitrogen from the atmosphere, perhaps not externally. This could be from engineering living fertilizers or engineering crops with the capability to fix their own nitrogen and produce their own types of fertilizers photosynthetically. But again, these are all ideas that we would love to see what kind of transformational, innovative ideas people might have in this space. The Smart Farm program has a number of different, has two different phases. In the first phase, we're deploying systems into the field to quantify the carbon intensity of different crop production. And we're going to verify new technologies using those verification sites. And we're pursuing a number of different strategies to get data that will allow us to quantify in-field carbon intensity. And this includes perimeter approaches, drone approaches, sensor networks that would go into farm fields, or modeling approaches that would connect, data acquisition to machine learning tools that would allow for better decision-making or informed characterization of carbon intensity and ecosystem services on farms. Now, one of the areas that the Smart Farm program is not, specifically investing in, but could be a very transformational area for changing agriculture and changing the opportunity space for precision agriculture and for quantifying at a very high resolution and low cost the carbon intensity of farming would be remote sensing. Remote sensing for agriculture applications would be ideal due to its capability to be scaled. There is, no or minimal labor and local infrastructure requirements. There's rich information of crop, biophysical, and biochemical traits that could be obtained, and large scale, with spatial and temporal resolution would provide a lot of new opportunities for kind of regional characterization of particular types of crops. Now, there are specific gaps in the technology space here, and any types of new ideas that would allow us to kind of use remote sensing or connect remote sensing to in-field systems would be really, really valuable. One of the things about remote, sensing applications is that they need to be, tied to and connected with in-field sensors to augment the overall data collection to provide ground truthing. And so there's perhaps, not just innovations in terms of the remote sensors themselves or the spectroscopic capabilities, but the communications and data integration capabilities as well to make this very functional. So overall, we believe that, barriers can be taken down with the right incentives and new technologies for feedstock production in, the bioeconomy supply chain. But actually, going a little bit further, we can think of, these new technologies and this new focus on not just a low carbon economy, but one that's a new carbon economy that really incentivizes and focuses on those that can remove and manage carbon are really valuable. We can think of the bioeconomy supply chains front end, not just as feedstock production, but ag and land-based carbon management. And there could be standalone opportunities for those types of services in the future with new technologies and new sensing capabilities. So to sum up, we are interested, from a carbon farming perspective, we are interested in new types of biotechnologies that would allow for greater carbon dioxide removal, carbon capture storage, and carbon farming. We are interested in new biotech and hard tech technologies that would allow for avoiding the emissions, environmental impacts of Haber-Bosch or other, energy and carbon intense aspects of agriculture. And in the sensing space, in the ability for us to be able to connect farm practices to carbon markets, to kind of move beyond even where Smart Farm is currently investing, but would be very transformational. We're interested in new ideas to realize and leverage remote sensing capabilities. So I want to hear from you. I'm very interested in these ideas. You can reach out to me. This is my contact information, and I look forward to hearing from you.